Welcome to Growing Ecommerce. I'm your host, Mike Ryan of Smarter Ecommerce, also known as smec. Today, I'm joined by my friend and colleague, Mark Haupt, our UK commercial director. He brings to the table years of online retail experience in several different contexts, and he's one of the most articulate and well-read people I've ever met. The speed at which he reads, recommends, and loans me his books is overwhelming. I have an entire Mark shelf at home. Sorry about that, Mark. I'll get those books back to you one day. But anyway, we talked through the Post Brexit, post-pandemic economic situation in the UK, his assessment of how Google's Performance Max has landed with the market, the increasing allure of Microsoft ads, and the agency in-house relationship. All right, let's get into it. So, Mark, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Mike. It's a pleasure to be with you today.
Would you get us started with a quick introduction? What are your skills, Mark? What themes interest you?
Yes, Mike. My name is Mark Haupt. Just for the listeners out there, I've been working for Smarter Ecommerce Limited. That's the UK arm of Smarter Ecommerce GmbH for coming on to six and a half years now. My career in e-commerce extends right the way back to 2000, when I was involved in some of the early prototypes of bringing e-commerce retailers, and these were often the early adopters and some of the big shops in the UK who are now very advanced in e-commerce, bringing them to a wider audience, mostly through portals like Yahoo, Excite, MSN. And so I had a very good training in the background of what retailers needed to do on digital marketing and how they converted viewers into baskets. The language has changed. Things are obviously much more advanced now. But between those things, I did a lot of different roles in my career on the media sales side, display advertising, early programmatic, and I worked quite extensively in the world of price comparison and how price comparison became a big affiliate business essentially for retailers. So coming to Smarter Ecommerce at this stage of my career was a great move, and really what got me into it was automation. And automation as it was in 2015-16, and automation how it's playing out now, it's just such a fascinating area. It incorporates so many different elements of e-commerce logic, audience behavior, audience science, and the latest things coming out now with AI and chat GPT, I find all fascinating. So I'm in a great place, and I take care of the UK retailers for smec Limited. And we've got quite a number of the biggest players working with us here in the UK, and they work from their UK bases, but they're often doing global campaigns. So that's me, really. Very happy to talk today.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. So 6.5 years. That was about 6 months then before I joined Smarter Ecommerce.
Right.
Yeah. So
and Mike, I was very happy when you joined, sir.
Thanks, Mark. I was very glad that you were already here.
Excellent.
Yeah, but price comparison too. I mean, that's a really interesting area. I remember going through the whole CSS transformation with you and everything. Yeah, been through quite a lot. Also, as you mentioned, like automation, what that meant in 2015 and what it means now are two different things, and how people feel about that. I want to dig into that a bit with you later on.
Please,
Before we get into that, maybe you could talk to us a little bit about, from the perspective of, let's say, the median UK retailer, online retailer, or what was 2022 like in the UK? What have the last years like? How's everything going? And what do you see happening in 2023? Broad strokes. You're no economist. You're not Nostradamus. I'm not going to hold your feet to the fire and say you were right or you are wrong on this. No, if you're right, I'll give you credit for that. But what have you seen lately, and what do you see next in the UK?
Great question, Mike. The UK is a fascinating market for e-commerce because, firstly, it was as I said earlier, it was one of the first markets to really go all in. Like the United States, it had an early start with getting funds raised, getting the technical architecture ready from a coding point of view to sell online to audiences which were seen as very primed already for this type of model. One of the things is the UK has got one of the best postal systems in the world. So the idea of quickly using those logistics to start selling online, it was an easy step for a lot of retailers. Where we stand today is that we still have what I call in the UK, we've got a very big head, meaning that at the top of the turnover, the turnover group, the quadrant that are sort of turning over the most online every year, hundreds of millions, of course, the corresponding investment and spend that they do has always remained a fairly consistent thing. So when you're working at the top end of e-commerce in the UK, you always inevitably are running into the big names that everybody knows. And I've been fortunate enough to work with some of those big names and still do today. But we don't ignore the fact that there's a lot of innovation coming through. There's a lot of entrepreneurship around e-commerce that still exists in the UK and keeps getting more advanced as the years go. There's a lot of funding raised for new marketplace models. There's niches that keep coming up. So there's always activity. There's always change going on. And I would say that as we start 2023 now, we're probably in the hardest phase of confidence that I've seen in a little while. We are surrounded. We have headlines in the UK and real problems in our country at the moment with basic things. And I think that the attention and diversion into what I would call the basics of life can sometimes, really be what's important for even the business community to focus on. But even though we do deal with, at the moment, quite specific challenges, we've got the exit from the European Union. We've got a lot of challenges that retailers are facing with their logistics and insurance and sending to other countries. We still have a lot of investment. We still have a lot of ideas being generated. And I personally think it's really good news. I think the second half of 2023 is going to be a much easier time than the first half. And I think we're almost halfway through the first half. I think the next few months as we go into the spring will continue to be quite challenging. But I do feel that the economic outlook for the UK retail marketplace will significantly improve in the second half of 2023. And we're seeing early signs of that. But that's not to say it hasn't been a tough couple of months. I think a lot of people are feeling that right now. Yeah.
Yeah, well, thanks for the dose of optimism at the end there. Also, the dose of realism. I was just discussing in the last episode. I was looking at consumer confidence in some different markets, and let's be frank about it. Consumer confidence is very low in the UK. It's a bit troubling. But on the other hand, we've also seen that the UK is seeing higher highs than other markets.
Right.
So this could swing the other way. And I just love what you've mentioned about these post-Brexit challenges, administrative, and I remember speaking with a client about that it's so tricky because, like, depending on the country of origin of different product, if it was imported or not, and then which category it's in, and then what is the value, and you cross different thresholds, and the whole thing is very dynamic, and ultimately the tax that needs to be charged, and all this stuff, it changes quite a bit, and it's very complex to reflect that in a way that makes sense to the consumer. Or do you eat the costs, or what do you need to do? It's crazy.
Yeah, no, it's definitely been a huge factor in a lot of the retailer channels that we've dealt with in the last 6 months, and especially that period, because there is still a huge European market for the UK retailers. They had extensive and growing customers in different countries, and those customers now find it much harder to get things with the level of confidence and trust that they used to. So that is a reason to pause where there should just be a reason to keep going. And even though the UK internal market is totally secure and remains as it was, certainly what it does is it focuses the mind on how to get things more efficient with your logistics, with your channels, with your efficiency, your spending. So there will be some upside in the sense that the retailers are going to learn about how to fix supply chains, how to source alternative supply chains. Innovation does come from adversity, but it would be much more comfortable and much easier for a lot of the marketplace that I work with to have a better outcome, a better deal, if you like, with the European Union countries when it comes to free trade and the ease of access across borders. We shall see. I'm quietly optimistic that it will gradually improve. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned market concentration as being a factor in the UK. That the big players are big and maybe getting bigger. Something I've observed, like if we look at Google Ads, for example, I've seen just in the UK compared to other markets, it's had the steadiest upward march in unit costs and like cost per click, cost per acquisition. And
that's right.
Yeah, it just feels like a relentlessly competitive market. I think because of that maturity that you mentioned, where this was a market that was set up and ready to go for e-commerce from the start. And now, it's a mature market, and it can be harder to find growth relative to other markets. It's going to be competitive. The channels are going to maybe face a higher level of saturation. So it's definitely a tough one.
Correct. And you're absolutely right about the click or the bid inflation that we see. I mean, you've posted yourself very extensively about this, and I hope a lot of people have read your blogs that you publish extensively on LinkedIn, and they're also available on the Smarter Ecommerce website. But a lot of the feedback that I've been getting at pretty high level, and this is from CMO level, this is from big sort of financial parts of the merchant retailers that often send questions for us to answer. Why are we paying so much more for our advertising? And it's a hard question to answer because, as you say, yes, there's just inflation, there's price inflation. There's bigger and more extensive budgets going after sometimes a smaller audience because there's reasons why you sometimes have to count your audience as narrower when it comes to certain products and categories because they are narrower. There's a fewer amount of what I would call everyday buyers because the consumer base has changed and people have allocated their household spend into different areas that they've had to prioritize. We've got a lot of things that make it difficult to buy efficiently, to predict efficiently. And of course, what we often see in the UK is we see extensive, what I would call fluctuations. Whereas a few years ago, we were able to predict a fairly static growth. We could be quite seasonal. We could help our partners and our partner retailers to focus in specific areas with a reasonable degree of predictive correctiveness. But now it's much more unpredictable. And I think unpredictability, uncertainty, instability, those things that nobody in business likes to deal with, they're just a feature of the landscape now. And one of the lessons that we've taken from that is that we have to help our retail partners and our clients to really overcome those uncertainties and give them data and show them their own data that can help them to get an advantage and to at least be more stable when it comes to their forecasting.
Thanks for sharing these insights with us, Mark. And what I love to ask you about next is kind of the state of, we mentioned Google Ads. What about Performance Max? It's the technology that we've all been talking about for over a year now. But in the UK, what's the reaction been like? We've got this hyper-competitive market. We've seen the face of automation changing over the last several years now. And how are these advertisers reacting to PMax? Do they love it? Do they hate it? What's a fair opinion of the technology? Because I feel like there are some people who hype it, and there's plenty of people who bash it. What do you think is a fair opinion? From the UK perspective.
Yeah, well, Mike, let's look at the timing for a start. So we're at the sort of halfway point of Q1 2023. PMax has been a feature of the landscape, for well over 18 months now. From early education to Google's first big sort of show and tell sessions. And it's only just the beginning, really. We're not even in a mature stage of adoption yet. But my own experience has told me that it's clearly a big thing, because it's one of those things similar to the CSS program you mentioned, which came out in 2018. It's a brand new way to think about acquisition, attribution, and of course investment. And Google are offering up a very, very extensive suite of big data options to retailers. They're essentially opening the door and saying, look, we've figured out how to get your customers for you, and we figured out how to show you what you need to put up to get that. And of course, the final thing is, this is what you're going to need to spend, and he has a way to spend that. But, and it's a big but, a lot of retailers are very skeptical, and they're skeptical because they don't doubt that this is a way to get action. This is a way to get performance. It clearly is. And some of the early results we've seen have been good, but I wouldn't say that it's been a completely evangelical adoption. And there are significant retailers who either on a partial basis or even on a complete policy basis will not be using PMax until it's much more widely understood. And they will probably be blending bits of it into their existing search architecture, and they will be making very database decisions. And subsequently, I think Google are going to find that they're going to be, they're going to be dealing with a world that's going to be using PMax, but they're going to be dealing with retailers who are using a whole lot of other things alongside PMax. And I think that's healthy. I think that's a great thing to predict, because what we really want is to get the best out of PMax for specific retailers. We don't want to have a universal application across everybody. That that just would be it would be kind of crazy, because there'd be big winners and there'd probably be quite a lot of or more losers in that. So our job has been to sort of show what PMax is capable of, but develop a way of doing PMax which really gets the benefits of it, really gets the advantages of it, and doesn't ignore everything else that is also good and can also be grown and developed. Because obviously data, pre-data, this is the data you want to bring from your first party sources, data that you want to use, that you've become au fait with as a marketeer, and you want to understand how that's going to work in the future. These things have all got to be blended, and they can often be really usefully used, even in a world where PMax is deciding the ultimate bid for the product. So mixed bag. I think it's going to work pretty well for a lot of retailers, but I don't think it's going to be universal adoption, and I don't think the biggest players are going to use it to anywhere near the extent that Google are hoping they will over the time frame of the next 18 months to probably 3 years.
Yeah, those are interesting opinions. I agree with you. I think the adoption in UK, I'd have to check. I think that it's higher than, let's say, in Germany, for example. It always varies per market, and I don't know. I don't want to go on making cliches here, but I feel like, for example, the average German online marketing manager has a bit of a tinkerer in them, and they definitely like to experiment, and they're going to be critical. I feel like the adoption could be a bit higher in the UK because of this ruthlessly competitive commercial environment where, the people are definitely willing to take risks and to try things. But it's a double-edged sword, because with Performance Max, it's not entirely clear always how you really can differentiate from the competitor if everyone's using that same technology as you.
Correct.
I love what you've said about this kind of like partial adoption and stuff like that, because what I've heard from speaking with Googlers, and I think it's somehow reflected in the architecture of the product, they really intend PMax to be an either or decision, not in regards to all campaign types, but because PMax is supposed to be complementary toward standard display campaigns, for example, or your YouTube campaigns, to a certain extent to your search campaigns, but it is not intended to be complementary toward shopping. It is they do essentially want an either or decision, but that's not necessarily the end of the story.
No, true, absolutely right. I mean, the PLA and the Google shopping revolution, which has been with us for well over a decade now, it's still, in my view, and from the feedback that I get and the data that I look at and the performance reviews that I'm regularly a part of, it's the place where the most trust and confidence is often placed by the marketeers. And there's a good reason for that. Is because the PLA it's a multi-purpose display advertising type. It increasingly serves as a price comparison device, and it's a way for marketeers at retailers to keep their product essentially at the most forefronted part of an audience that are actively in the lower funnel. Of course, everything else that PMax is offering around the Google ecosystem is very valuable, and the idea that you could convert and you could find new customers with Gmail ads and YouTube, fantastic. But of course, it will never replace the solid, almost shopping retail marketplace idea of the PLA, which still is the place where the majority of the clicks will happen and the majority of the conversion will happen. So getting PMax right means absolutely always never forgetting what you're doing with Google Shopping in its sort of current understood purist format. And we see that every day. And, we still put a lot of activity and effort into making sure that the PLA work, that CSS works. And when we're doing that very well for our retailers, normally the retailers have got more confidence then to go over and try different PMax approaches and just give PMax a go and see what that does for them. But yeah, it's a very much a mixed bag. But as you say, PMax is impressive. It's growing. It's going to be a feature of the landscape for the future, the short-term, medium, and long-term future. But it will evolve too, and it will be interesting to see how the channel mix gets affected by the PMax adoption. I think the UK, you're right. It's a place where people do go for early tests and they take risks, and yeah, we certainly are experiencing that now. And we're helping numerous retailers with their PMax strategies.
I mean, I think it's funny when you look at the adoption of Performance Max. Well, it was a product replacement. It replaced Smart Shopping, and in the course of about a year or less, 9 months, really, it had this basically exponential growth in adoption. And you see all these best practices coming out like in the middle of that exponential growth curve, which I think I have to be skeptical about that. And I know we've gone to pains to not say, X, Y, or Z is a best practice. Like we talk about, we use some nerdy phrases like opinionated framework, which is maybe taking it too far. But the importance being testing. And I think that's the other thing with Performance Max is that it definitely looks good in the platform, what's occurring there on an in-platform reported basis. But then digging deeper, I think the question that PMax will really have to answer will have to be about incrementality. Is this really doing something that you couldn't have done? And I, of course, the transparency heavily scrutinized. It would be great if they would just show us more about what's occurring here, where stuff is serving.
Yes,
but like you said, it's a new product. There's a lot more coming. I've seen the roadmap. There's stuff on there that's going to make people really happy that we've been asking for and that we wanted. There's also things that, Google has devised on their own that looks really exciting and cool. And let's just see, because we're still in early days, actually.
Absolutely. I think it's going to be an exciting year. We're going to learn a lot more in the months to come. And, the more we can see, the more Google can share, the better for Google and the better for everybody in the community. Because we want to do the best by our retailers. We really want to help them. It's not easy to understand what's going on if unless you're such a deeply embedded search specialist within a retailer, and there are many of those. A lot of the senior layer, a lot of the C level are still looking for answers. They are signing off the budgets, and they want to understand if the money that they are sending over to the search team is being wisely spent. And it's always been the same. But there's much more accountability that's going to be called for, because you can get great results, you can get great revenue upturns, but that can change very quickly when you realize that big parts of your inventory and your catalog are not making the returns that they should. And, there's going to be questions about that too. So PMax has got a lot to offer. It's going to change the world in some ways around e-commerce retailers, but it's got to be seen as part of a bigger strategy think, and it's got to be really it's got to prove itself to the marketing mix as any channel in history in a marketing mix has ever had to be honest. So yeah, exciting times, but lots to still learn and understand about PMax.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't want to belabor this. We can move on from the point, but I just want to share one thing that I've been thinking about. I don't think I've discussed on the podcast before. It's just for me a framework about the way people can approach automation, or what I've seen in terms of it. And I don't know, it's not rocket science, but I just think of these kind of three main personas. There's like hackers, harmonizers, and holdouts. That's the way I think about it. And the hackers are looking for ways to potentially use automation up to including fully automated campaign types like PMax. Like, how can I tweak this thing or find loopholes or look in the settings, digging deep in there to make this thing perform in ways that, or like have functions that it's not necessarily intended to have, or just, a classic example would be this popular feed-only approach where people try to cause Performance Max to act more like smart shopping, or to a certain extent more like standard shopping. And then the harmonizers would be taking it more at face value and looking at, okay, what are the interactions with other campaign types? How can I strategize? Like, how can I have this thing not just eat my account alive, but be a part of my account? And then the holdouts are rejecting the technology, and that number, the holdouts, we could see backlash. That number could rise after this huge adoption wave. But
could do. That's I think that's a very good grouping. That's a good methodology there, and it fits pretty well into what I'm seeing and experiencing at the moment. And we've got I wouldn't say we've got equal amounts in each, but we've got significant evidence to show that is the broad standpoint as we start or as we sort of go halfway into Q1 2023. Good one. Well, would you, Mike? Are you planning to write about that again? Are you putting that into some blog articles coming up, or how will you?
I'm thinking about it.
Yeah, cool. Yeah. I'd love to read that. Actually, I think a lot of people would love to read that. Yeah.
Definitely. I wrote something. I had an interview with Search Engine Hubbub and about trends for 2023, and I mentioned it there, for example. So I wrote something short about it, but I'm thinking about writing a little bit more there.
Okay, cool. Great.
And future listeners, you can find out if I did or I did not.
It's a term that I actually have brought into discussion a couple of times, which would be AI generated content, because this is an area that's going to revolutionize the way that many parts of the retail mix are going to work with channels. Feed, product landing pages, product category pages, SKU descriptions, all of this stuff suddenly becomes a much more dynamic field, because if you're injecting an AI generated content code into different parts of the way you supply your feed, the way you bid on different platforms, you're suddenly going to start getting feedback, and you're not going to just get it over time. You're going to get it instantly, and it's going to be fascinating how retailers will use that data. And I think Microsoft have really led the way here, and they are in the news all the time about being ahead of the game. And I think they've captured the imagination of a lot of people in the world right now with their advances in this area. And I do believe that the Microsoft e-commerce offer is evolving very fast. We look, I'm not an account specialist with the Microsoft platform, but I'm participating in discussions where what I'm hearing is that we really need to put this on the agenda, more and more. Obviously, we're a Microsoft elite partner, so we handle a massive amount of budget for our retail partners, and when we bring up the idea of giving some attention to Microsoft, or maybe taking Microsoft into a much more visible discussion and going very specifically about trying new experiments or putting more budget in, and going down roads where we have a very clear idea that Microsoft is going to cause effects that previously we just wouldn't have predicted. So conversion is good. When you put budget on the Microsoft platform and you use it well, you normally get a great outcome. And we're definitely seeing much more positive adoption of Microsoft. The budgets there have grown in 2022. And our retailers are always asking us about Microsoft. And more importantly, we're always bringing it up and saying, have you thought of this? Have you thought of that? The Microsoft teams that we work with are very advanced. They're very well trained. They put a lot of effort into making their offer translatable. And of course, as a partner to Microsoft, we get that very quickly from them. And they're very open, and as you said, they share with us. And I think we've brought a lot of value to our retailers with their Microsoft investments. And I really am confident that we're going to see more growth and more adoption in 2023.
Yeah, I feel you there. I've got the Microsoft, or rather the Bing search engine market share open, and I'm skimming through that, and it's interesting because. Yeah, I mean, it's funny. They've moved up from, like, in the UK from like a 6% share to now they're averaging, or late the most recent data that I'm seeing, they were averaging like 10% or so, and you see that there are spikes along the way, which probably have to do with updates to their operating system, and they're able to drive some default search behavior for a period of time, but then it doesn't quite stick. But over time, they're ratcheting it up, and I think these are just really exciting things that help prove their relevance. And it's just funny how Microsoft went from having a bit of a stodgy and monopolistic feeling, to be honest, to suddenly being like they're somehow the darling, and they feel like an underdog somehow, and they're not like perceived as part of big tech in that same way exactly. It has me wondering, though. It has me wondering if one day we're going to be looking back and like now people look back at Google and say, "How is that double-click acquisition allowed?" And if we'll be saying, "How is the Xandr acquisition allowed? How did we let this and that happen?" But I don't know, from today's standpoint, they're wonderful to partner with, and I'm just a fan of what they're doing. I think they are innovating. So.
Yeah. One final thing I'll say there is that the adoption is going up. Obviously, the percentage of the total search marketplace remains at that stubborn, sort of. Well, by the way, 10% is good. It's come up. Every
That's
percentage.
Not nothing.
It's not nothing, and the effect of that is that Microsoft have definitely driven innovation. So even if they are not getting the lion's share of the budget, they are proving themselves to be real players in this game, and of course the advances that they make are quickly transferred. And I think Google and Microsoft have been in a kind of dance with each other around shopping and e-commerce and search. They've definitely both benefited from each other's innovative steps forward here, and that's a good thing for everybody. It's good for retailers if they've got more choice, and specialists who operate the platforms just have a lot more knowledge now, and they have fresh ideas that almost every week that they can try and use and take to their clients. So, I celebrate the fact that they've made an advance here. Really, I do.
Definitely, and as it stands currently, they can be risk takers. They can be aggressive because they've got nothing to lose.
Exactly.
They're in this very offensive position, and it puts Google in a very defensive position, which we saw with. I mean, I was blown away with how quickly Google reacted to the AI topic. I was thinking there would be some beta products late in 2023, perhaps like second half of 2023, and we're barely 2 months in, and they've got something. So it's pretty impressive.
That is, yes.
Now, Mark, I want to pick up something I heard you mentioning earlier. You were talking about how challenging it is to stay up to date in these environments, and the role of specialists in organizations versus a perspective that an agency or somebody who does this full time, so to say, can or a different scale can offer. But like, there's always a debate or some kind of a opposition, maybe a false dichotomy, I don't know what, between in-house versus agency, and in-housing being viewed as a trend. People wondering if in-housing will pick up in a recessionary environment, or will actually will advertisers try to cut costs there and view rented services more favorably. But what's your take on the exchange between in-house and agency? How do you see it?
Yeah, great question, Mike. And it's one of the areas. It's not just because one of my primary responsibilities for smarter e-commerce is to obviously acquire, develop, and then grow partnerships. When you're in the process of doing that, you get to discover a lot of things about the way, in our case, retailers plan their resources around search and general marketing. You obviously have to participate in the discussions around how resources are deployed. But in doing that, what you learn is that a lot of the opinions about working with in-house and working with specialist partners are changing very fast at the moment. There's a lot more porous exchange going on. The boundaries between in-house teams and their specialist agencies are coming down every single week, because you have this world where knowledge really does become the commodity that has to be exchanged efficiently and with a high degree of cultural sharing and knowledge between teams. So what that requires is not only that there's specialist technical knowledge, and that there's a deep understanding of strategies and execution of strategy, which has always been a part of what agencies have done. But there has to be a real understanding of mindset, culture. There has to be a completely open and trusting relationship that sits at the heart of any relationship. And when that does happen, and those things can happen through natural chemistry, but they can also be developed, and bringing the consciousness in of asking the questions, making sure that time is set aside to discuss non-operative issues that both companies are experiencing, looking at the deployment again of particular persons and skill sets to certain tasks and responsibilities. I feel that whole area is really, really, really changing right now. And the best relationships are when you can feel that there's a harmony there. You could feel that the retailer knows that they can, if something goes wrong or somebody leaves suddenly or a whole group of people decide that it's time to go, the agency can really sit there and help to not only do the work that's needed, but to regenerate the knowledge, to input the knowledge into the retailer and help that retailer develop their next stage of growth. And of course, as a specialist ourselves at Smarter Ecommerce, we get to work with so many incredible businesses. So whilst we are always confidential and never share data about our clients with other clients, we take on board that knowledge and we quickly use that knowledge where we know it's going to work for the situation or the retailer at hand. So yeah, it's a fascinating area, and I think it's changing the agency world. And I don't think the question anymore is should we do in-house or should we use an agency? It's now much more of, we've got resources. What are the resources? And I don't just mean people and time. I mean, what are the things we're doing brilliantly? What are the areas where we've really done well in the past? But what does this agency, what does this group of people, what does that tech provider give us? And how do we count that and let that, multiply our resources? And when you start questioning things from that point of view, you start seeing a vision and an image about, what a growth machine can look like. But that growth machine doesn't sit in one place. It sits as a kind of living entity that's been created as part of a really well-designed partnership. And we do that. We do that often, and we have that relationship with most of our retail partners, and that's really what gives us our growth and gives us our impetus and our confidence for moving forward. And I think that we're going to see much more of that. And I really encourage any agency out there to adopt this type of thinking and bring it up with your partners. Go deeper on the issues around strategy and mindset and culture, and don't leave them on the table, because there's a lot of value there. So sorry if that was a long answer, but that's just coming from the experience of what I've been doing in the last couple of years, actually. So yeah.
Well, that was a beautiful answer, and we have a lot of agency listeners and we have a lot of in-house listeners. So I hope it's valuable to both sides. And yeah, I just it's funny. A couple episodes back, I was talking with Scott Kennedy from Franklin Sports about this idea of like but like being this kind of bearing this Olympic torch of knowledge. It sounds, I don't know, maybe a little melodramatic, but really you have to pass on knowledge and keep that flame kindled, and it's not
Absolutely.
always the easiest thing. And I love this idea too of force multiplication. Not to get too militaristic, but you think, there's like an aircraft carrier that's a force multiplier, and how can you force multiply knowledge and experience? And that's
Absolutely.
I think when you find that kind of an effect, you've got a healthy relationship. But Mark, thanks so much for sharing your time and your knowledge and experience with us.
Absolutely.
I want to ask you one more thing before we go.
Sure.
Any projects, people, anyone you want to shout out?
Well, I just want to, we really do see that in particular categories now in the UK, we have such almost overwhelming competition. When I say that, what I mean is that you take something like cosmetics. Let's choose fragrances. I'm just being random here. And you've got brilliant retailers who really know how to buy the right stuff, and they know that there's consumers always looking for the stuff. If you ever want to see how a successful and how profitable online retailing of health and beauty and cosmetics and fragrances can be, look around you at an airport duty free next time you travel. People love these products, right? But the problem, of course, is that there's so many sellers and there's so much choice. So I want to give a shout out to all of the retailers in health and beauty and fragrances who are working so hard. I know they're working so hard to get this right, because we've worked with a lot of them. We're using data sets, we're using pricing, we're using price dynamic automation, so that the classic rule-based settings that you can you can respond to a price change. You can seek out your ideal buyers with specific prices. We're working at a lot of different levels with our retail partners in this area, but I know that it's not easy going, and it's one of the areas where I think real innovation is happening. But of course, it's painful because you get big ups and you get big downs, and you can have extraordinary performance when you're on a roll, and you can have a period of weeks or months when things aren't going so well. So yeah, to anybody's listening who's helping these retailers, or if you are one of these retailers yourselves, big up to you guys. Good luck.
Yeah.
You really are at the coal edge, and the science of retailing is never more purely represented than it is in selling cosmetics and fragrances and things like that online. It's a hard business, but if you do it well, you really can you can make big gains. So yeah, great stuff going on there. But there's plenty of categories where that's happening. It just happens to be one I'm particularly interested in. And
for sure. I think I know some of the people or companies on your mind, and I should have them on here one time. But definitely,
I think we should do that
to us.
I would love, Mike. You know what? I would love us to bring together a group of these retailers. They will all know each other. They'll all be competitors. But yeah, we should share openly what everybody's experiencing, because people can help each other out. And it's really good to sort of name what's going on and then see what solutions are, because ultimately everybody can win here. There's not too many of them yet, but there's a lot of them that they can go down a road to a certain degree, and once they've gone down that road too far, it's very difficult to come back and win. So you've got to really be alive, you've got to be awake, and you've got to be on a daily basis really doing everything you can to find the best ways of converting. It's a fascinating area. I hope we do return to it, but hopefully that was an answer you could live with, Mike.
I can live with that, Mark. Thank you.
Right,
and thanks for bringing that UK perspective today to totally cliche American like myself. And
cool.
And thanks to all the UK advertisers and agencies out there. Keep fighting the good fight.
Absolutely. Great people, all of them.
Thanks again, Mark.
All right. Cheers, Mike. All the best. Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to Growing Ecommerce. And if you enjoyed this podcast, please consider sharing it with coworkers, friends, or within your professional network. We really appreciate it. This podcast is produced by Smarter Ecommerce, also known as smec. To learn more, visit smarter-ecommerce.com.